and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news on stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Information we got last week holds it the La Republic du Cameroon, in a desperate effort to celebrate the May 20th day, staged a celebration even before the 19th of May for proof to portray the May 20th day was celebrated. As they know that on the 20th of May, Amazonian forces will be very alert and so decided to celebrate ahead of time. This quite clearly showed us last week that the event will be a sabotage of their initiative. Images emerged 3 days to the 20th day festivities, showcasing Cameroon doing a backdoor celebration. That act indeed showed it as an event that shouldn't be done, and also for the fear of the ARFs. The 20th May, according to Yaoundé's government, is a day they celebrate a purported national unity. And Amazonians and La Republic of Cameroon's citizens as well, for historical and legal reasons, do not quite see the day as founded and has been on a few La Republic of Cameroon citizens on Equinox reviews that this day should be revisited, as they call the Fed National. Well, this whole idea of the Fed National has been viewed as a day celebrated on the premise of falsehood and injustice. We'll see more about this in the full briefings of Undaunted, coming up right after the prime headlines.
Now, these are the prime headlines for today. La Republic du Cameroon impoverishes Ambazonia for fleet of 4x4 jeeps for government officials. While few La Republic du Cameroon government officials lives in luxury and the entire country in peril. Also tonight, bomb blast shakes Boya on May 20th. An explosion puts BS thugs under during National Day charade in Boya. Today is Monday, May 22nd, and another lockdown in Amazonia. Amazonians are poised to frustrate La Republic du Cameroon in their home soil. Also tonight, you're going to be looking at an overview of the 20th May celebration. And in an African report, most recent refinery in Africa attracts presidents from far and wide. All right, and also we are going to be looking at reports from the Ukraine and Russian story. Now, let's get to the news in detail.
Our vision in this interim government is to make ABC a leader and a real war horse of our struggle. We want to grow it, expand it, hire and train more hands, and broadcast round the clock, around the world, and take command of the media space of this world.
You can enjoy all round the clock, 24/7 exclusive moments of bliss as an ABC Amba TV Club member. A cappella. Latest Nigerian / African movies, global politics, ABC Amba News and updates, historical documentaries, and lots more. In our daily programs, we have Undaunted, ABC Amba News, bringing into the news untold stories with Onyi Okpala and Star Smart. Exclusive discussion, revolutionary panel conversation, infotainment, edutainment, intro governmental debates on topical issues with Tar Paddy King, State of the Liberation Movement, fronting IG and people of Ambazonia's position, the Struggles Weekly Update, with Secretary Martin Mungwa, PhD, FASC. Health is wealth, health education, and awareness within the Ambazonian community with Dr. Yaya. Liberation prayer and intercessory ministry for Ambazonia with Pastor Victor Amba. Our freedom, spiritual awareness, and education for the Ambazonian community with Pastor Victor Amba and Pastor Commando. Church and politics, neutralizing the myths and preconceived religious and political philosophies that limit the Christian involvement in the realms of decent politics with Pastor Commando. The Horizon, the voice of the Ambazonian woman with Dr. Patience Abiedo and Lady Casey. Our Amber history, bringing to limelight the hidden history of Ambazonia to the world with Pastor Commando. Appointment on community building, education on patriotism within the Ambazonian communities with Ma Rachel Itatima. Ethics for an Emerging Nation, watchdog of basic principles and morals of a nation at war with Ma Dorothy Ngwa. Upcoming programs: Pigeon News, Vernacular Talk Show, County Roots, Activists Corner, Amba Focus, only on ABC Amba Television. We the people, the voice of the voiceless. For 24/7 access, subscribe as a club member on www.abcambatv.com/subscribe.
The just past La République du Cameroon 20th of May National Day celebration at the Colonial Political Center portrayed how wicked and cruel the regime of President Paul Biya is. From the social, economic, and educational perspective, the regime has recorded no strides. From the educational standpoint, there are La République du Cameroon government schools in suburbs with no benches for students or pupils to sit on, talk more of any school building. As the health sector is concerned, the population at certain localities is left at the mercy of God. Such hospitals are void of equipment, drugs, and even electricity supply. And even when there are trained personnel, their working condition is deplorable. Now, this is where we will begin the full briefing of Undaunted tonight. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, Lungi. Good evening, Ambazonians. Economically speaking, major income generating industries are today a shadow of themselves. This is the case where they are still existing, for many have been shut down completely. Before, development oriented institutions like the Public Works Department, the PWD, Marketing Board, and Santa Coffee Estate, just to name a few, were all closed by the President Biya. To demonstrate wickedness in another dimension, the president has plunged the country into huge foreign debt. Paradoxically, these money are not channeled into any production scheme. Rather, it is used to acquiring fleets of cars of different capacities to top government officials. At this point, it is a sort of reward for them in embezzling taxpayers' money. Why spend so heavily on well-to-do La République du Cameroon top government officials when the common man lives in misery?
Well, at the just parade of the La République du Cameroon's 20th of May National Day celebration at its colonial political capital, the president of La République du Cameroon and the ruler of La République du Cameroon's government proved to have resolved to be nothing else but a consuming economy. The celebration was a demonstration of how flooded the country is with high-standard 4x4 jeeps that the regime keeps furnishing top La République du Cameroon government officials with. The fleet of jeeps give a beautiful color to the streets they cruised on. Unfortunately, it does not reflect to the lives of the taxpayers living in misery.
Well, the dictator Biya of La République du Cameroon is focusing his attention and diverting all state resources to the betterment of top workers. and not on sustainable projects for the benefit of the entire population. A civil society activist says this is a calculated move by Paul Biya and his close associates to remain in power. By putting top state officials into very comfortable situations, they are obliged to protect the regime in place, thereby safeguarding their gains. The same top La Republic du Cameroon government officials that a greater chunk of the state coffers is lavished on when they fall sick and go for medical attention out of the country.
They do not trust the medical system in the country as they failed in developing and raising it to standard equally because they know the porous condition under which they do subject the training of medical personnel. There is no form to Market Road in Ambazonia. The ring road promised the people of Ambazonia, but the President Paul Biya in the 80s is still to see the light of the day. The stretch of roads linking Santel local government area to the main town Bamenda is a nightmare, yet top La Republic de Cameroon's government officials have fleets of the latest models of 4x4 jeeps at their disposal.
Well, an improvised explosive device was detonated close to the end of the population neglected La Republic du Cameroon National Day Charade in Boya. This explosive was planted by the Ambazonian Restoration Forces in that part of Ambazonia, certainly on the eve of the said celebrations. The single act on the part of the Restoration Forces puts to question the much talked intelligence of the people.
Well, it is funny and shameful on the path of the terrorist La Republic de Cameroon occupational forces to claim to be securing an event for over a week and an improvised explosive device is planted on the eve of the event without their knowledge. This is proof that the Ambazonian Restoration Forces have a better mastery of their territory, Ambazonia, and that the ARFs can outsmart the terrorist forces of La Republic de Cameroon at any time. With such, the question is, does the colonial La Republic de Cameroon military withstand the Ambazonian Restoration Forces?
Well, at the end of the May 20th charade in Bongo Square in Boya, the main town of the Atlantic zone of Amazonia, an IED went off, the explosive was planted, and subsequently detonated at the heart of the La Republique du Cameroon march past. The loud explosion left the thugs gripped in fear and shock. The May 20th band celebration in Boya, just like elsewhere in the Atlantic zone of Amazonia, was welcomed by a ghost town lockdown. It is still not certified if there was any casualty as a result of this IED explosive.
All right, moving on. Just a day after the entire people of Ambazonia have been at home for 2 days, that is on the 19th and 20th of May, observing a lockdown in protest of the celebration of La Republique de Cameroon's National Day in Ambazonia, the people of Southern Cameroons are not giving up. They are determined as a united force to see the La Republique de Cameroons pack out of the Southern Cameroons. Today, May 22nd, 2023, is another Monday and another ghost town or lockdown. One could have expected to see the people of Southern Cameroons, but no, their desire to be free from the oppression of La Republique de Cameroon is stronger than missing out on a single day of business. What a determination by our people to be free.
The streets in Bamenda, as well as the entire southern Cameroon's Amazonia today, May 22nd, 2023, are empty as the entire country is observing lockdown. The people of southern Cameroons are still very committed in the respect of lockdown, popularly known as the Ghost Town, instituted in 2017. A day after the charade in the name of the La Republique du Cameroon Celebrations Day, the people of southern Cameroon's Amazonia are reminding La Republique du Cameroon of the fact that she is no longer wanted in southern Cameroons anymore.
On Ghost Town days, the people of Southern Cameroon are still able to furnish themselves with basic commodities for the house from neighborhood stores. With this, the only parts suffering from the Monday lockdown is the occupational members of BS government in Ambazonia. All the La Republique de Cameroon extortion points in Ambazonia are grounded these days, a big loss for the colonial administration. Since the institution of money was down in Amberland, the colonial La Republique de Cameroon government has lost a lot of funds and is still losing. All right, last week we got information that said La Republic du Cameroon, in a desperate effort to celebrate the May 20th day, staged a celebration even before the 19th of May for proof to portray the May 20th day celebration was celebrated. As they know that on the 20th of May, the Amazonian forces will be very alert and so decided to celebrate ahead of time. Well, this quite clearly shows us last week that the event will be a sabotage of their initiative.
Well, 3 days to the 20th day festivities, images emerged showcasing Cameroon doing a backdoor celebrations that act indeed showed it's an event that shouldn't be done, and also for fear of the Amazonian Restoration Forces. The 20th May, according to the Yaoundé government, is a day they celebrate a purported national unity, and Amazonians, La Republic du Cameroon citizens as well, for historical and legal reasons, do not see the day celebration founded. As has been seen on Equinox, La Republic du Cameroon citizens demand their government to review the whole 20th May celebrations, what they call the Fed National. This whole idea of this Fed National has been viewed as a day celebrated on the premise of falsehood and injustice.
The big week during this year's celebration is that even French Cameroonian citizens are not happy with their government for insisting to celebrate this day. All of their intellectuals in almost all of their platforms have this same view against the 20th May celebration, except the Cameroon Radio Television, CRTV, that we're aware was not against the May 20th celebration. While we saw a number of people disinclined to it outrightly, we have this brief social media reaction to the UK and Cameroon wishing all Cameroonians a happy National Day by Fabric Leather, to which our news director Tapadi King replied to.
Well, Fabrice Lena commented to the Happy National Day of which saying national unity should not be celebrated as the brainchild of the unitary system. Fabrice says, in fact, Cameroon will enjoy national unity with full engagement of citizens in a new federal republic. 1972 arrangements was a foundation of injustice and birth of a new state on falsehood. He says, if national unity is the goal, October 1st is the ideal date. First things first, Fabrice Lenau admits the illegality of the May 20th day amidst other debatable points he made. But let's go further into the reactions.
All right, Mr. Tapadi King replied, and he said, Fabrics, Lena, and you expect their southern Cameroons to accept any form of coexistence, Federal Republic, with the unapologetic criminals of the 1972 injustice and falsehood. In their arrogance, they would rather seek to impose a special status to a party who came into an experiment as an equal. Do you expect anyone to trust them? Well, he goes on to say, have you forgotten, Bia said their actual objective is simply to assimilate the Southern Cameroons. What framework would you use to establish a new federal republic without the express will of a people who have been widely emancipated of their historicity and legality? Or are you suggesting that the UN Resolution 1608, Article 5, should be ignored with another crime? Well, Chapati King goes on to ask, do you think the peoples of Southern Cameroon aren't aware that the Republic of Cameroon voted no against their independence on April 21st, 1961, which simply means the occupation of Southern Cameroon today is belligerent and illegal?
Well, for the record, Fabrice Lena is a francophone politician in Cameroon, a commentator in most television houses in Cameroon. While his point is still future unity, pointing out that they can attain national unity, although they do not have it yet. One thing is clear from this an historical fact: the Southern Cameroons do not share the same independent state and have simply been annexed. With a response from our news director, Mr. Tapadi King, we'll leave the May 20th celebrations post May 20th celebrations at this. Africa, Nigeria commissioned Dangote refinery today amid hopes of transforming the country into a net exporter of petroleum products. But analysts said securing crude supplies could affect it achieving full production this year. The government of outgoing President Muhammad Buhari sees the refinery as the answer to Nigeria's repeated fuel shortages, the latest of which hit the country in the run up to February's disputed presidential election.
Well, President of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, the President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, Faurel Gassembo of Togo, Mahamat Dabi of Chad, Macky Sall of Senegal, and Mohamed Bazoum of Niger are set to commission Africa's largest 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery today, Monday, in Lagos, Nigeria.
President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu as well will grace the occasion, and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who will not be physically present, will present his goodwill message virtually. The epoch-making event is expected to transform Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Some speculated benefits include taking Nigeria off the petrol import market and ending fuel scarcity.
Well, the new refinery, owned by Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, can meet 100% of the Nigerian requirement for oil products: gasoline, 53 million liters per day; diesel, 34 million liters per day; kerosene, 10 million liters per day; and aviation jet, 2 million liters per day, and also have a surplus of each of these products for exports.
As at the time of this report, all the 36 state governors and most of the governor-elect, ministers, senators, and captains of industries in Nigeria and others from outside the country, global oil traders, top international bankers, international multilateral agencies have indicated their readiness to grace the ceremony. Well, we wonder if this will be a huge hand for Africa.
And on the forecast tonight, let's start with the Greek government. The Greek government is facing fresh condemnation of its immigration policies days before general elections after the release of video footages depicting the forcible expulsion of asylum seekers who had sought sanctuary in the country.
Well, barely 48 hours before polls open, the Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis' center-right administration has been put on the defensive by extraordinary documentation of the illegal pushback. The footage taken by an Austrian activist on Lesbos last month was brought to light by the New York Times, which published the material on Friday, after being verified and corroborated by the US outlet. For years, activists and journalists have dug into claims that the Greek authorities are illegally pushing migrants out of Greece's border, but hard evidence has been fragmentary. The paper said in a statement, the Greek government has consistently denied the mistreatment of migrants. The video may be the most damning evidence yet of its violation of international laws, EU rules governing how asylum seekers must be treated.
Well, the footage amounts to a shocking indictment of policies the Mitsotakis government has long denied, in evidence that is likely to ignite an excruciating response in other EU capitals. A group of 12 asylum seekers, including children and a 6-month-old baby, are filmed being summarily expelled from the Hellenic Coast Guard from Lesbos, where they had arrived from Turkey. The refugees, described as Somalis, Eritreans, and Ethiopians, are shown being driven to an unmarked white van to a remote spot on the Aegean island before being forced into a high-speed inflatable boat by men whose facial features are concealed by balaclavas. The dinghy then transfers them to a Hellenic Coast Guard vessel, which proceeds to abandon them on a rift in the middle of the Aegean Sea. There, they are left before being picked up by the Turkish Coast Guard.
We didn't expect to survive on that day, says Naima Hassan Aden, a 27-year-old from Somalia who experienced the ordeal with her baby. She said when they were putting them on the inflatable raft, they did so without any mercy. The incident took place this year, according to the publications. Previously, pushbacks have been partly captured at sea, where Greek authorities argue they are permitted by law to repulse undocumented migrants attempting to enter the country's sovereign territory. The expulsion depicted in the video does not take place at sea or even in disputed waters, but on land inside EU territory, which the asylum seekers had safely reached.
The forcible return of people seeking refuge from war and persecution is in violation of laws adopted by civilized Western nations, including the 1951 Geneva Convention, which outlines the legal protection of refugees and of which Greece, like all EU member states, is a signatory. The government accepts its immigration policy is tough, but insists it is fair, with the Mitsotakis, who is seeking a second term in office, hailing the drop in migrant flows and arrival of asylum seekers as a major success of his 4-year tenure.
Visiting Lesbos last week on the campaign trail, jubilantly said he had kept his promise to protect Greece's land and sea borders, saying he especially is proud that he kept his commitment to local communities to solve the issue. He said they implemented a firm but fair policy on migration and protected their country's borders both on land and at sea and reduced irregular arrivals by 90%. He says we proved that the sea has borders and those borders can and must be guarded.
While it is unclear to what extent the government's standing will be affected by the video as the pre-electoral campaign enters its last day, Greeks by and large have welcomed the ruling party's tough stance on immigration. The Greek public has proven to be very insensitive on this topic, says Professor Yannis Tibas, who teaches political science at the University of Athens. The government's stance may be hostile, but it has also proven to be a major success.
Well, while the weigh-ins on both sides are high, millions of Amazonians who fled the war to find refuge in other countries are left to their fate. And it's unfortunate that usually not a lot of them make it alive on these shabby rafts. We can only hope the international community does something about the war in Amazonia.
All right. And last week, Thursday, we reported that the US is ready to train the Ukrainian military. The United States is determined to support international efforts to train Ukrainian war pilots on modern fighter jets, but Washington has still not decided whether it will be the United States or other ally that will ultimately hand over the F-16s to Ukraine. These were stated by Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor. In his words, he says, I think given the number of F-16s that are currently available from the stocks of our European allies and the fact that based on the money Congress has given us, there are so many other priorities for systems to give, it may be that we focus more on third-party transfer, but the president has not made a final decision. This is what he told CNN on Sunday.
Well, previously, Washington officially refused to hand over aircraft to the Ukrainian side, arguing that the armed forces currently need other systems such as artilleries, missiles, and tanks. It was also claimed that the transfer of fighter jets would require months for the training of pilots and maintenance of technicians, as well as the deployment of infrastructure in Ukraine. In this regard, Sullivan explained that in his way, the warplanes would not be able to become a decisive element in the widely anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive given the timeframes.
Well, however, according to the advisor, conditions are evolving. The United States has mobilized an exceptional effort to deliver on time and in full everything Ukraine needs to launch these counteroffensives, Sullivan said. Now that we have done that, we can look forward to the long-term capacity of Ukraine to be able to defend itself and deter Russian aggression, by the advisor explained. He also noted that the fourth generation fighter jets, in particular the F-16s, are relevant to the capacity of Ukraine armed forces.
Meanwhile, as we reported earlier last week, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden met on Sunday in Hiroshima, where the G7 leaders are meeting. The parties discussed further cooperations to strengthen Ukraine's defense capability as well as Ukraine's peace formula. In a related development, the 3rd Assault Brigade continues to knock out the occupiers from their positions near Bakhmut. The territory, that's 1,730-meter wide and 700-meter deep, has been cleared of enemy forces.
Well, during yesterday's battle alone, 23 invaders were eliminated and over 40 were wounded in action. Enemy military hardware, including tanks, were also destroyed. The task was completed by their 2nd Assault Battalion. This is what Brigadier reported. As Ukraine Form reported earlier, Commander of Ukraine's Ground Forces, Colonel General Olaksda Seksy, and Ukrainian soldiers are advancing on the flanks in the suburbs of Bakhmut and are actually approaching the point when they could take the town into a tactical encirclement.
The transfer of F-16 jets to Ukraine would raise the question of NATO's role in the conflict and would not undermine Russia's military goals, senior Russian diplomats said on Monday. There is no infrastructure for the operation of the F-16 in Ukraine, and the needed number of pilots and maintenance personnel is not there either, says Russia's ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov. What will happen if the American fighters take off from NATO's airfields controlled by foreign volunteers? Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rykov said any transfer of the U.S. jets to Ukraine would be absolutely pointless and stupid.
All right, and coming up right after this break will be the editorial.
In our editorial of today, taking further look into external self-determination through referendum, the case of Ambazonia by Marcus F. Abendong, we continue with the Eritrean independence referendum. Eritrea, unlike the Southern Cameroons, which was a trust territory, was a British protectorate after Germany and its allies lost the Second World War. The protectorate lasted until 1952 when the United Nations, ignoring the legitimate desire of Eritreans, voted to grant it independence by attaching it to expansionist Ethiopia in a loose federation. In 1961, Emperor Haile Selassie ended the federation and annexed Eritrea, and war broke out. Eritrea's EPLF won the Liberation War in 1991 and called on the United Nations to conduct a referendum for Eritreans to tell the world what they wanted. The EPLF had won the war and could have gone ahead to proclaim its independence, but the territory decided to follow a more legitimate route that would garner international support and paid its way into the Committee of Nations. That worked out well. It is true that the Southern Cameroons did not have the kind of international backing that Eritrea had, but Ambazonia has a huge diaspora that can rise to the occasion if it really wants to. This independence war is winnable because it is truly God ordained. God does not fail. From the writer's opinion, the Eritrea War of Independence lasted decades because of the reluctance of the international community to correct its own errors that cost thousands of lives and untold sufferings for the unsuspecting people. Alas, someone felt their pain and the United Nations resolution was passed calling for a deciding referendum. Why did the United Nations make recourse to a referendum instead of respecting its own charter trusteeship agreement to solve the problem? Rather, the UN preferred the costly referendum which it sponsored. The answer lies in the body's respect for sovereign nations, which enjoy first consideration. Moreover, decades had passed and things might not necessarily be what they appear to be. Who knows, the system thinks? The agitation for independence restoration might be coming from only a handful of gun-carrying disgruntled individuals. These are the terms used by Yaoundé to describe Southern Cameroon's independence activists. This may seem simplistic, but it is the way things are in the Committee of Nations. Sovereign nations have priority and are given the benefit of doubt until proven otherwise, most often at a great cost. A close examination of the Eritrean independence referendum gives us a little idea of how the United Nations system works. Eritrea is a former Italian colony ceded to the United Kingdom at the end of the Second World War. It was a British protectorate until the United Nations voted in 1951 to grant it independence by affixing it to Ethiopia. By the time the Southern Cameroon was being pushed to accede to independence by joining La République du Cameroun on 1st October 1961, the Eritrean-Ethiopian experiment had already collapsed and war broke out on 1st September 1961. For Ambazonians seeking shortcut, Eritrea's independence war lasted 3 decades, ending in 1992, and a referendum conducted in 1993. The Eritrean referendum was sponsored by the United Nations but only supervised by the organization. The UN Observer Mission was set up pursuant to the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 47/114 of December 16, 1992. The United Nations Observer Mission had a mandate to verify the impartiality of the vote, report claims of irregularities, verify the counting, computation, and witness the proclamation of the results. The writer stresses the mandate of the UN Observer Mission at the Eritrean independence referendum. The vote was conducted and result proclaimed unchallenged. Eritrean voted to separate from Ethiopia by 99.83%. It was overwhelming. The East Timorese vote was not this overwhelmingly in support of separation in spite of the fact conducted by the United Nations, though the outcome was separation. Now, East Timorese independence referendum. For the brief history, East Timor is a former Portuguese colony. Indonesia invaded and annexed East Timor in 1975, soon after the territory declared its independence from Portugal, leading to war. The Indonesian President Habibie requested that the United Nations conduct a referendum to decide the matter. That means more than 3 decades of a senseless war, carnage, thousands of deaths, and untold suffering. Unlike the Eritrean independence referendum vote that was conducted by locals with Ethiopian oversight, the East Timorese process was handled entirely by the United Nations system, from voter identification through registration to voting, counting, and results declaration. For this purpose, the United Nations mission to East Timor, UNAMET, hired the services of 240 international staff, 270 civilian police, 50 military liaison officers, 425 UN volunteers, and 668 local East Timorese staff for translation and driving. The voter turnout was massive, 98.93%, and the result compared to the Eritrean referendum vote was less overwhelmingly in favor of separation from Indonesia, 78.5%. The aftermath, unlike the peaceful aftermath of the Eritrean independence referendum vote, the East Timorese referendum was followed by an outbreak of violence on the territory. Pro-Indonesian militias, those we call Atanga MG boys in Ambazonia, and the Indonesian army and security forces were responsible for the violent reaction. East Timor's infrastructure was massively destroyed, thousands killed, including women and children. The United Nations had not anticipated such a reaction and so was not ready. By the time the UN peacekeeping mission was deployed, the damage had been done. No comparison. From the above understudied referendums, It can be said that no two events are ever the same, even when they go by the same appellation. Whereas Cubicoi, the Scottish referendums, have been organized by the locals and only observed by the center, the Eritrean and East Timorese referendums were organized by the United Nations, albeit with different levels of involvement. Ottawa and London could trust Quebec and Scotland to organize their own referendums because transparency in electoral matters is part of the culture in this part. The same could not be said for the Indonesians, but to a lesser degree for the Ethiopians. This explains why the Eritrean referendum vote, though sponsored by the UN, was only observed by the international body, whereas the East Timorese referendum processes were entirely handled by the United Nations from voter identification to the declaration of results. Common to all these referendums was the participation of their diaspora citizens. As you would observe, nowhere that the citizens of these territories seeking separation living in the territories of the mother countries participated in the referendums. In the case of Scotland in particular, Scottish citizens living in England were not allowed to vote during referendums. The reason is obvious. Scots living in, say, London, with investments there will have vested personal interest in opposing separation from what seems to be home to them. They may not directly feel the difficulties and constraints of Scots back home. It is said that London is more Scottish than Scotland. This certainly is the same reason for which Eritreans and East Timorese living in Ethiopia and in Indonesia may not have been allowed to participate in the independence referendum of their countries. From the writer's point of view, Her Majesty's government so desperately wanted to deprive the Southern Cameroons of independence that it laid and hatched multiple schemes to block the territory from acceding to autonomy and self-government. Having successfully blocked the independence plan for all colonies and trust territories, the United Kingdom imposed her own contraption, independence, by joining. Even here, the United Kingdom so badly wanted the Southern Cameroons to remain as a part of Nigeria. It seemed that she abandoned all her post-plebiscite responsibilities towards the former. What befell the Southern Cameroons then in 1961 was evil, well orchestrated and executed by Her Majesty's government. Number 10 Downing Street was so bent on punishing the Southern Cameroons, it disregarded warnings and counsels from Parliament and its own representation in the territory. The UK's preference for a plebiscite instead of a referendum was probably part of the plan. Plebiscites are only consultative and do not have the power of law, even at the United Nations. Is that why the UK was able to dodge her responsibilities without anyone raising a finger? The evil that visited the Southern Cameroons in 1961 is the more outrageous because it was executed exactly 1 month after a similar experience between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Between the time Eritrea and Ethiopia had collapsed following the annexation of the weaker partner by the stronger on September 1st, 1961. Now, how could the international community have gone ahead with the unification plan between the Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon after the East African experience had just failed? Tomorrow, we'll continue this interesting article, taking further observation from the writer's perspective on the questions of Amazonia independence referendum. But for now, we've come to the end of our editorial of tonight. If you want more of such interesting articles, kindly visit our website at www.abcambatv.com for more. Subscribe, become a club member, and a part of this winning strategy. Find out payment details on your screen. I'm Sir Smart reporting for Undaunted, ABC Amba TV.
Payment method: www.abcambatv.com/donate. ABC Amba TV payment channels: Cash App 202-650-2216, Zelle 240-486-8768, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. PayPal donations at abcambatv.com. For more details, call +124 028 4301. You can email us at info@abcambatv.com.
All right, and Star Smart, thank you so much for that editorial. It was a wonderful piece.
Thank you.
With that editorial, we've come to the end of Undaunted tonight. But before we go, let's take a look at our major highlights.
On Undaunted tonight, we brought to you how La Republic du Cameroon impoverish their citizens and Ambazonians for fleet of cars, fleet of jeeps for government officials. We also brought to you the bomb blast shaking Boya on May 20th celebrations. On Undaunted tonight, we also brought to you the Monday, May 22nd, and another lockdown in Ambazonia today.
All right, tonight on Undaunted, we told you about the May 20th celebration. We looked at an overview of the May 20th celebration. In African Report, we told you the most recent refinery in Africa has been commissioned today in Nigeria, and dignitaries around the world came around. And also on the foreign scene, we told you that Greece is considering expulsion of asylum seekers in their country. And that was it for tonight on Undaunted, bringing to the news on George Stories. On behalf of Michael Anchor, Star Smart, and the entire Undaunted crew, we say thank you for tuning in.
We leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.